Imagine you are standing on a bare limestone hill, somewhere in the Judean highlands. The year is roughly 3,500 BCE. There is nothing here. No temple, no wall, no tower, just rock, wind, and a single spring seeping out of the earth at the base of the hill. Cold, clear water bubbling up from a crack in the limestone, as if the ground itself is breathing. This spring is the only reason anyone ever stopped here. The hill has no river, no harbor, no commanding view of a trade route. By every standard of ancient city planning, this is the wrong place to build. And yet, on this unremarkable ridge between the Mediterranean Sea and the Dead Sea, at the junction of 3 continents and the convergence of 3 of the world's great religions, human beings would build something that has never, in 5,000 years, been allowed to die. In its documented history, this city has been destroyed at least twice, besieged 23 times, attacked 52 times, captured and recaptured 44 times, more than 24 distinct empires, Canaanite, Egyptian, Israelite, Babylonian, Persian, Greek, Roman, Byzantine, Arab, Crusader, Mamluk, Ottoman, British, and Israeli, have held it, lost it, and mourned its loss. The United Nations has passed more resolutions about this city than about any other place on earth. Its name, in the oldest surviving record, is Rusalimum, probably meaning foundation of Shalim, a Canaanite god of dusk. Over 5 millennia, it would be called the City of David, the Holy City, Aelia Capitolina, the Eternal Capital, Al-Quds, and simply Jerusalem, a word that, in Hebrew, Arabic, and the memory of exile, has come to mean something beyond a place. It means a longing, a promise, an argument that has never been resolved. To understand why this hill became the most contested piece of ground in human history, we need to understand what makes a city sacred, and what happens when 3 civilizations decide, independently, that the same stone is the center of the universe. This is the entire history of Jerusalem. It begins, as all great stories begin, with water. For the first 3,000 years of human habitation at Jerusalem, the city existed because of a single geological accident, a karst spring called the Gihon, surging up through a crack in the eastern face of the limestone ridge. The Gihon was an intermittent siphon spring. It did not flow constantly but erupted in unpredictable bursts, filling underground cisterns, and then going still. To ancient peoples who did not understand hydrogeology, this seemed miraculous. The earth breathed. Water appeared from nothing. The spring gushed, and then it rested, like a living thing. By roughly 3000 BCE, a permanent settlement had formed around that spring. By the 17th century BCE, they had grown formidable enough to erect walls of 4- and 5-ton boulders on the eastern slope, 26 feet high, to protect the Gihon from enemy attack. Whoever controlled the spring controlled life itself in this dry limestone landscape. This is the first pillar of Jerusalem's existence, the spring. The biological fact beneath the theological story. The city's first written mention comes around 1900 BCE in Egyptian documents listing foreign enemies to be ritually cursed. Among those cities appears the name Rusalimum. Jerusalem enters the historical record as a threat to be annihilated. It will not be the last time someone tries. The Amarna letters, cuneiform clay tablets found in Egypt in 1887, include a desperate message from Jerusalem's ruler, a man named Abdi Heba, writing to the pharaoh around 1350 BCE. The city of the king is lost. All the lands of the king have revolted. Send troops, send archers. There is no one to save us. The pharaoh did not respond. The hill survived anyway. What transforms this minor city-state into the most contested piece of ground in human history happens around 1000 BCE, with a decision made by a warrior king named David. His conquest of Jerusalem from the Jebusites was not merely political. He moved the Ark of the Covenant, the portable throne of the Israelite God, to Jerusalem, fusing two things that had never been joined before: the capital of a state and the dwelling place of the divine. Jerusalem was not simply where the king lived. Jerusalem was where God lived. His son Solomon completed the logic. Around 970 BCE, on a flat limestone outcropping at the northern edge of the ridge, he ordered the construction of the first temple. It took 7 years. The craftsmen were Phoenician, brought from Tyre. The inner sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, housed the ark in a room no one except the high priest could enter. And he only once a year. A pillar of cloud, the text says, filled the temple when the ark was brought inside. And here lies the second pillar, the rock itself. Beneath the temple platform, a single outcropping of bedrock protruded above the limestone plateau. Jewish tradition identified it as the Aven HaShetia, the foundation stone from which God created the world, the place where Abraham bound Isaac, the axis mundi of the cosmos. No other piece of geology in human history has been assigned this density of meaning. The same rock would be claimed 15 centuries later by a second civilization, and a third. But we are not there yet. The third pillar is perhaps the most durable and the least expected: the book. From the moment the temple was complete, Jerusalem became the subject of the most extraordinary literary project in human history. The Psalms returned to it again and again as subject, as symbol, as ache. If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth if I do not set Jerusalem above my highest joy. No other city in history has generated this volume of sacred text about its own existence. The fourth pillar we cannot yet name, because it has not yet happened. It requires a catastrophe to be born, and that catastrophe is approaching. The temple gleams, the spring flows, the city grows. For almost 4 centuries, under the divided kingdom of Judah, Jerusalem is the unquestioned center of Israelite religious and political life. In 701 BCE, the Assyrian king Sennacherib lays siege with an army that had already destroyed 46 other Judean cities. King Hezekiah orders a tunnel cut through 500 meters of solid limestone to channel the Gihon Spring inside the walls. Sennacherib turns back. Jerusalem survives, and its citizens conclude the obvious: the city is under divine protection. The dangerous idea has taken root. The destruction, when it comes, will be all the more devastating for that belief. In 597 BCE, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II arrives at Jerusalem's walls. He is the product of a century of imperial expansion and Judean kings who miscalculated which empire to trust. Jerusalem's destruction does not come from nowhere. It comes from the particular vulnerability of a city whose identity rests on a theology of divine protection. Because when that protection appears to fail, it does not merely destroy a city, it destroys a worldview. Nebuchadnezzar installs a puppet king, Zedekiah, then watches him rebel. The Babylonian army returns and lays siege for 18 months. The Book of Lamentations captures what it felt like from inside. Is it nothing to you, all you who pass by? Look and see if there is any sorrow like my sorrow. The walls are breached in the summer of 586 BCE. Zedekiah tries to flee under cover of darkness and is captured in the plains of Jericho. His sons are executed in front of him. Then his eyes are put out, so that the execution of his children is the last thing he ever sees. A month later, Nebuzaradan arrives with orders to finish the work. The Temple of Solomon, 4 centuries old, is burned. the bronze pillars stripped, the gold vessels taken. The Ark of the Covenant disappears from history, never to be seen again. The leading families of Judah are marched in columns across the desert, into exile in Babylon. The city that believed it could not fall has fallen. What should have been the end was, instead, a transformation. Picture a man sitting beside the Euphrates River, somewhere in the flatlands of Babylon. The year is 580 BCE. He is a scribe, one of the educated elite deported from Jerusalem 4 years earlier. He has a reed pen, a clay tablet, and a memory that will not leave him alone. Around him, the city of Babylon is extraordinary. The Ishtar Gate, with its glazed blue tiles and golden bulls, the ziggurats rising in stepped terraces toward a sky that is, in his theology, the wrong sky. He is 2,000 kilometers from Jerusalem. He will probably die here. His children will grow up knowing the temple only from what he tells them. He picks up his pen and begins to write. What the exiles in Babylon created in those 70 years of captivity is one of the most astonishing cultural acts in human history. Without a temple, without a king, without a homeland, they rebuilt their entire civilization in text. The Torah was compiled in its definitive form. The prophets wrote, "They invented the synagogue, a gathering for prayer that required no altar, no fixed sacred geography, a portable religion that could survive anywhere. And at the center of every text, every prayer, every morning service, Jerusalem. Not the city they had left, the city they were carrying inside them. The exile did not diminish Jerusalem's sacred status. It transformed the city from a place into an idea. And ideas cannot be burned. This is the fourth pillar. Return. The premise that exile is not permanent. Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon in 539 BCE and issued a decree. Displaced peoples may return to their homelands. The Cyrus cylinder, still preserved in the British Museum, records his words. The exiles returned. By 516 BCE, 70 years after the first temple's destruction, the second temple stood on the same rock. The pattern was now set. Destruction does not end the city. It deepens the city. Every conquest adds another layer of longing, another reason why this particular hill cannot be let go. The Babylonians, in trying to erase Jerusalem, made it permanent. For the next 5 centuries, Jerusalem navigated the collision of East and West. Alexander the Great swept through in 332 BCE without a fight. Then the Seleucid king Antiochus IV Epiphanes outlawed the Sabbath, outlawed circumcision, and erected an altar to Zeus in the Holy of Holies. The Maccabean revolt expelled him. The temple was rededicated, celebrated as Hanukkah to this day. For one brief century under the Hasmonean dynasty, Jerusalem was the capital of an independent Jewish state. And then Rome arrived. In 63 BCE, Pompey besieged Jerusalem, entered the city, walked into the Holy of Holies, and left without taking anything. The temple treasury was untouched. The city breathed. Under Rome, Jerusalem reached its greatest physical magnificence. The king Rome appointed, an Idumean named Herod, undertook a construction project of almost incomprehensible scale. He wrapped the natural Temple Mount hill in massive retaining walls, creating an artificially leveled platform of 36 acres. Some stones weigh 500 tons, fitted without mortar with such precision that you cannot insert a piece of paper between them. 10,000 workers. 40 years of construction. The temple, clad in white marble and gold, was visible from 20 miles away. Pilgrims arriving from the valleys below would have seen it blazing in the morning sun like a second sunrise. In its shadow, a young rabbi from Galilee named Jesus of Nazareth taught in the temple courts, in the same colonnaded portico where pilgrims changed money and bought doves for sacrifice, where the smell of blood and incense hung in the air together. He was crucified on a hill just outside the city walls. Within a generation, the movement that began in his name had spread throughout the Roman Empire. Jerusalem acquired a third layer of sacred meaning, not just the city of David and Solomon's temple, but the city of the Passion, the resurrection, the birthplace of Christianity. The city was accumulating theological weight it could not afford to carry. Something would have to give. The spring of 70 CE. Inside the walls of Jerusalem, something is happening that goes beyond the mechanics of siege warfare. A priest named Ben Tephalion, named in a passage of the Talmud, is watching the temple burn. He is standing on the steps of the inner courtyard, the stones still warm from the morning sacrifice, and the smoke rising from the sanctuary is not incense smoke. The Roman legions of Titus have been outside the walls for 5 months. The city's grain stores were burned by rival Jewish factions in the first weeks of the siege. People are eating their sandals. A wealthy woman named Miriam Bat Issi, named in Josephus, has done the unthinkable, which I will not describe here, except to say that starvation had dissolved the boundary between the living and the dead. 500 people a day are being crucified on crosses visible from the walls until the army runs out of wood. Josephus, watching from the Roman side, writes, "The multitude of those that therein perished exceeded all the destruction that either men or God ever brought upon the world. On the 9th day of the month of Av, the same calendar date on which the Babylonians had burned the first temple, the second temple catches fire. Whether Titus ordered it, or whether it was an accident, does not matter. The Arch of Titus in Rome, erected 11 years later, depicts the looted menorah being carried in triumph through the streets. Jewish prisoners were forced to walk in the procession to make a display, Josephus writes, of their own destruction. The Jewish community of Rome, for the next 19 centuries, would not walk beneath that arch. What the Romans could not anticipate was the consequence of their thoroughness. Without a temple, Judaism transformed. The sacrifice was replaced by prayer. The priest was replaced by the rabbi. The fixed geography of Jerusalem was replaced by a direction of prayer, and the words spoken every Passover Seder, "Next year in Jerusalem." Hadrian, 60 years later, leveled what remained, built a Roman city on the ruins, renamed it Aelia Capitolina, and banned Jews from entering on pain of death. He erased the name Jerusalem from every official document. And what he accomplished was to make Jerusalem the most longed-for city in human history. You cannot make people forget a place by forbidding them to go there. You make them need it more. In 313 CE, an emperor converted, and Jerusalem was reborn. Constantine legalized Christianity. His mother Helena made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem in 326 and ordered the construction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre over the site of Christ's tomb. Jerusalem became a Christian holy city, its fifth great reinvention, and the empire poured resources into its transformation. In 614 CE, a Persian invasion shattered it. Churches burned, the true cross seized and carried east. Heraclius recaptured the city by 628 CE. He had less than a decade to enjoy it. In the year 636 CE, at a river called the Yarmouk, in what is now northern Jordan, a Muslim Arab army defeated the Byzantine force sent to stop them. The road to Jerusalem was open. What happened next is one of the most remarkable scenes in all of Jerusalem's history. The Byzantine patriarch, a scholar named Sophronius, agreed to surrender, but only to the Caliph himself. The Muslims sent a commander who looked like the Caliph to trick him. Sophronius recognized the ruse immediately. and so Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab made the journey from Medina to Jerusalem, dressed in simple travel-worn robes, accompanied by a single servant, taking turns riding their shared camel. Sophronius met him at the city gates. When the time for prayer came, Sophronius invited Umar to pray inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Umar refused. He said, "If I pray here, future Muslims will use it as a precedent to convert this church into a mosque, and I will not take Christendom's holiest shrine from them." He prayed outside. A mosque was later built at that spot. It bears his name today. The Covenant of Umar guaranteed the protection of every Christian holy site and the right of Jews, banned for 3 centuries by the Byzantines, to return. It was, by the standards of any era, an extraordinary document. And in 691 CE, the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik completed the Dome of the Rock on the plateau above the foundation stone, the oldest intact Islamic structure in the world. Its golden dome seized the skyline of Jerusalem for Islam, not by destroying what came before, but by building something so magnificent the eye was drawn inevitably to it. The architect was a Christian. The dome was designed to match the dome of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Jerusalem was becoming something no single faith had intended, a city that bore the physical imprint of all 3. Pope Urban II called the First Crusade in 1095 in response to Seljuk restrictions on Christian pilgrimage. On July 15, 1099, the Crusaders breached Jerusalem's walls. What followed was a massacre. The Jewish community burned alive in their synagogue, Muslims killed in the streets and on the Temple Mount. The Crusaders wept at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre while their armor was still wet. The Kingdom of Jerusalem lasted 88 years, a brief, violent parenthesis. On July 4, 1187, the Ayyubid Sultan Saladin destroyed the Crusader army at the Battle of Hattin by cutting off their water supply on a summer day in the Levant. 3 months later, he stood at Jerusalem's gates. No massacre. Christians who could pay ransom were freed, churches untouched, Jews invited to return. The cross atop the Dome of the Rock was removed. The sound of it falling was audible across the city. Saladin wept as he entered. The Mongols sacked the city in 1260. The Mamluks rebuilt it, filling the old city with the madrasas, fountains, and covered markets that still line its streets. In 1517, the Ottomans arrived. Suleiman the Magnificent gave Jerusalem its current face. Between 1538 and 1541, he rebuilt the city walls, the walls that define the old city today, 4.5 kilometers of dressed stone, 12 meters high, 8 gates. He commissioned the polychrome tiles on the exterior of the Dome of the Rock, still brilliant after 5 centuries. For 400 years, Ottoman rule held. For 4 centuries, the city was a backwater of a vast empire. Pilgrims came. Scholars came. The 3 faiths coexisted inside the walls in a silence that was not quite peace, but was not quite war. Then the modern world arrived, and with it, the oldest argument in a new form. The 20th century arrived in Jerusalem like a storm that had been building for 50 years. 2 nationalist movements, Zionism and Arab nationalism, converged on the same territory with incompatible visions of its future. On December 9, 1917, British General Edmund Allenby captured Jerusalem from the Ottomans. He entered on foot through the Jaffa Gate, deliberately, as a gesture of humility. 401 years of Ottoman rule ended in a morning. The British mandate for Palestine began, and with it the problem that has never been solved: 2 peoples, 1 land, 1 city, at the center of both claims. On May 14, 1948, Israel declared independence. The next day, 5 Arab armies invaded. When the fighting stopped, Jerusalem was cut in half. West Jerusalem under Israeli control, East Jerusalem, including the Old City, the Temple Mount, the Western Wall, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, under Jordanian control. In the Jewish quarter, Jordanian forces demolished 57 synagogues and razed the historic neighborhood. For 19 years, the Western Wall was inaccessible to the people who had prayed toward it, across 2,000 years of exile, every single morning. On the morning of June 7, 1967, Israeli paratroopers fought their way through the winding lanes of the Old City. The Six-Day War had begun 2 days earlier. The Old City was within reach for the first time since 1948. The first soldier to reach the Western Wall was a paratrooper named Zion Karasenti. He pressed his face against the stone. He was 26 years old. He wept. Around him, battle-hardened soldiers were doing the same, weeping, touching the ancient blocks, stuffing prayers into the crevices. The Israeli Defense Minister, Moshe Dayan, placed a written note in the wall. It said, "Peace be upon Israel." What was that moment? It was the completion of a loop open for 1900 years, since Titus destroyed the temple and the rabbis wrote the destruction into every morning prayer. The stone the soldiers were touching was built by Herod 2,000 years earlier, on a platform over a rock that 3 civilizations had declared the center of the universe. Every one of those civilizations had been certain it was the final heir to that hill. None of them was wrong. All of them were wrong. The hill belonged to all of them and to none of them, which is exactly the condition Jerusalem has maintained against all reason and all violence for 5,000 years. Stand for a moment above the Old City at sunset. The light turns the limestone walls amber, then gold, then the color of cooling embers. The dome of the rock catches the last sun and holds it. The bells of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre ring. The muezzin's call rises from a dozen minarets simultaneously. From the direction of the Western Wall, you can hear the sound of prayer. Hebrew syllables worn smooth by 2,000 years of repetition, rising through the stone and the smoke and the evening air. 35 centuries of civilization are compressed into 1 square kilometer of ancient stone. Beneath the streets where tourists walk today, archaeologists have dug 30 meters down through Ottoman masonry, Crusader rubble, Byzantine mosaic, Roman columns, Herodian ashlar, Hasmonean walls, and Babylonian destruction debris, until they reach bare limestone above the Gihon Spring. Every stratum is a civilization that was certain it was the final heir to this hill. Every stratum was wrong. The city outlasted them all. Jerusalem was destroyed by fire, plowed and salted, its name erased from every map. And each time it was destroyed, the sacred weight increased. The Babylonian exile created portable Judaism. The Roman destruction created rabbinic Judaism and accelerated Christianity. Hadrian's erasure made Jerusalem the most longed-for city in history. The Crusader massacre deepened the Muslim claim. The 19 years of Jordanian partition made the Western Wall more sacred, not less. Destruction is how Jerusalem works. It is the mechanism by which the city has survived. No other city in history has been layered this deeply with the residue of human longing. The answer to the question the city poses, not who does Jerusalem belong to, but why every civilization has been so certain it does, is the spring, the rock, the book, and the return. Water, stone, memory, and hope. The 4 things that no conqueror can take and no exile can extinguish. Jerusalem has been lost 35 times. It has been found 35 times. And somewhere in that cycle, in the stubborn insistence of human beings that this particular hill matters more than survival, more than empire, more than reason, is something that looks, from a sufficient distance, like a definition of what it means to be human. The hill is still there. The spring still flows. The argument continues. What was lost can be understood. What was broken can be studied. And what was forgotten can be reconstructed. This is America Reconstructed. See you in the next era.